There's something uniquely painful about unfinished potential, especially in science fiction, a genre that thrives on worlds waiting to be explored, characters destined for deeper arcs, and ideas that stretch far beyond the confines of a single runtime. And yet, buried deep in the archives of Hollywood, lie films that should have been the start of something more. The late 20th century, especially the 1970 seconds through the 1990 seconds, was a golden era for bold sci-fi concepts. Studios were hungry for the next Star Wars or Alien the next franchise to build an empire around, and time after time they stumbled upon them and still chose to walk away. Some of these films ended with open cliffhangers. Others were crafted as clear first chapters of larger universes, with sequels already teased in marketing. Fan communities rallied, wrote letters, speculated endlessly. But the sequels never came. Studios cited low returns. Creators went silent. Contracts evaporated. In a few cases, whispers of completed screenplays and scrapped storyboards suggest something darker, a willful burial of projects that got too ambitious or too risky. And maybe that's the real sci-fi tragedy. Not when a franchise ends, but when it's never allowed to begin. So tonight, we open a vault of forgotten futures, stories that lit the fuse but never got to explode. Here are 15 sci-fi films that were built to launch cinematic universes, but instead vanished into silence. Fakt 1, John Carter, 2012. Based on the century-old stories that inspired Star Wars, John Carter should have been a juggernaut. Mars, sword-fighting aliens, a Confederate deserter turned interplanetary savior. Disney envisioned a full trilogy. Merchandising was lined up. A franchise was coming. But John Carter was dead on arrival. Botched marketing, bloated budget, and a tone that didn't fit any one quadrant. The title lacked clarity. The trailers missed the mark. And when the box office stumbled, Disney pulled out. What got buried was a vast universe, one that predates and arguably shaped the entire sci-fi adventure genre. Barsoom, Helium, Therns. These weren't just world-building details, they were franchise pillars. The film ended with a cliffhanger, a villain still alive, a hero on a quest, and a world worth fighting for. But it became one of Hollywood's most expensive misfires, and the franchise died with it. In hindsight, John Carter didn't fail because it lacked vision. It failed because it arrived too late, and no one knew how to sell it. But for those who saw the spark beneath the sand, this was a saga that should have ruled galaxies. Fact #2, Edge of Tomorrow, 2014. Live, die, repeat. That was the tagline, and it became the legacy. Edge of Tomorrow took a time loop mechanic and wrapped it inside an alien war narrative, elevated by Emily Blunt's unforgettable performance and Tom Cruise's rare vulnerability. It ended perfectly and imperfectly. The reset, the survival, the lingering questions about memory and fate. Fans were desperate for more. The manga source material had more to give. Warner Brothers promised a sequel. Blunt and Cruise were in. A title was floated. Live, die, repeat, and repeat. Then, silence. Schedules conflicted, scripts stalled, and the moment passed. As of now, the sequel remains in limbo, occasionally teased, never confirmed. And that's the tragedy. Edge of Tomorrow didn't just reinvent action sci-fi. It made you want to return again and again. It built a world of rules, stakes, and strange beauty. Instead of a franchise, we got one perfect loop, and a promise that never reset. Fact 13 Tron, Legacy 2010. It took nearly 30 years for Tron to get a sequel. But Tron, Legacy wasn't just a continuation, it was a complete redesign. A digital opera drenched in neon, underscored by Daft Punk, and dripping with philosophical ambition. It introduced new characters, new conflicts, and an open ending that practically demanded a third film. Quora, an isomorphic algorithm born in the grid, enters the real world, representing a singularity moment for science and humanity. Plans were in place. Tron 3 aka Tron, Ascension, was greenlit, with scripts written and cast returning, but Disney pulled the plug. Why? Because Tomorrowland underperformed. That's all it took. Tron, Legacy became a high-budget orphan, its visuals and ideas adored by a cult, but its momentum shattered. The Tron universe, with its cyber philosophy and immersive aesthetic, was made for sequels, shows, even games. But it was treated as a one-time spectacle. To this day, fans hold out hope. Rumors of a Jared Leto reboot linger, but for many, Tron. Legacy is the middle chapter of a trilogy that never finished, and maybe never will. Fact #4 District 9, 2009. Bacham Bamuitu. When District 9 landed, it didn't feel like a debut, it felt like a warning shot from a new cinematic voice. Neil Blomkamp's alien apartheid allegory, framed as a documentary turned war film, was brutal, intimate, and undeniably original. And its ending? Practically a trailer for District 10. The protagonist, Wikus, transformed into a prawn-like alien, waits for the mothership to return a 3-year promise that fans clung to for over a decade. The world of District 9 was rich. Corporate militaries, slum-settled extraterrestrials, alien technology ripe for exploitation. It was a playground of ethical dilemmas, ready for expansion, but the sequel never came. Blomkamp's career veered into uneven territory. Studios grew cautious. Despite occasional updates and scripts in development, District 10 became a ghost title, always close, never real. Why it never happened remains a mystery. The film was profitable, Oscar-nominated, and had a built-in fan base. Perhaps the allegory was too pointed, or maybe Hollywood didn't trust the vision behind it. Whatever the reason, District 9 is the rare sci-fi film where the last shot is a first chapter, and yet that chapter still hasn't been written. Fact #5. The Man from Earth, 2007. Bacham Bamuitu. No lasers, no spaceships, just a group of academics in a cabin, and one man claiming he's 14,000 years old. The Man from Earth is science fiction at its most minimalist and its most haunting. Written by The Day the Earth Stood Still's Jerome Bixby as his final work, the film unfolds in real time, as a quiet conversation turns into a reality-shattering revelation. And just when it seems to resolve, the final moments open a door far bigger than anyone expected. It was never meant to be a franchise. And yet, it begged for one, not in spectacle, but in scope. What other lives had this man lived? What other truths did he bury? A micro-budget sleeper hit, the film became a cult phenomenon through piracy and word of mouth. A quasi-sequel was made, The Man from Earth, Holocene, but it lacked the impact of the original and left fans divided. The truth is, the franchise that could have emerged from this wasn't one of sequels but of philosophical sagas, anthology-style explorations of immortality, memory, and time. But the moment passed, the fire faded. Still, to this day, fans ask, what would you say if someone you trusted told you they never died? And that question alone should have launched something eternal. Fact #6. Battle Beyond the Stars, 1980. Bacham. In the wake of Star Wars, every studio scrambled to launch their own space saga. Roger Corman, the king of low-budget ingenuity, responded with Battle Beyond the Stars, a cosmic reimagining of the Magnificent Seven, produced for a fraction of what Lucas spent on one effect shot. But here's the thing, Battle Beyond the Stars wasn't a joke. Its world was vast, strange, and overflowing with alien cultures, sentient ships, and ancient galactic threats. The characters from the rogue cowboy pilot Shad to the Valkyrie warrior Saint X-Min felt tailor-made for sequels and spin-offs. The film ends with victory, yes, but also the clear sense that this galaxy has more battles to come, and with James Cameron contributing early visual effects, before Terminator, it's no surprise fans expected more. There were rumors of a series, toys were prototyped, but the budget constraints and lack of studio infrastructure meant it stayed grounded. What's tragic is how much Battle Beyond the Stars inspired future space epics yet never got the franchise love it helped birth. In another timeline, this could have been the cornerstone of a pulpy, colorful universe rivaling Star Wars. In ours, it's a beautiful, scrappy, one-off, forgotten, but foundational. Fact #7 Jupiter Ascending, 2015. Bacham. Few films have tried to build a new space opera from scratch with as much ambition or chaos as Jupiter Ascending. Written and directed by the Wachowskis, it introduced a galactic aristocracy, DNA dynasties, and a secret history of Earth tied to alien commerce. It was messy, sure, but also rich, daring, and brimming with ideas. There were bounty hunters, flying rollerblades, and Eddie Redmayne whisper screaming about galactic inheritance. It wasn't just a film, it was an entire universe collapsed into 2 hours. The ending was open-ended. The lore screamed for expansion. Spin-offs, animated series, novelizations, all viable. The Wachowskis had the world building, they just didn't get the chance to refine it. Why? Because the film underperformed. Critics mocked it. Audiences didn't know what to make of its operatic tone. It wasn't cool like Guardians or grounded like Interstellar. It was weird. But weird can grow. And over the years, Jupiter Ascending has amassed a curious cult fans who see past the flaws and into the mythic bones underneath. In a different reality, we'd be 3 films deep into this strange, shimmering galaxy. But in ours, it remains a monolith of unrealized ambition. Dune's chaotic cousin, left drifting without a fleet. Fact Hashite Dread, 2012. Forget the campy 1995 version. Dread, starring Carl Urban, was a brutal, stripped-down reinvention of the iconic 2000 AD comic character. Confined mostly to a single mega-block skyscraper, the film delivered a razor-sharp, blood-soaked blend of justice, drugs, and dystopia. But the most shocking thing about Dread? It was designed to go further. This wasn't a one-off, it was a pilot. The creative team planned for a trilogy, a slow-burn expansion into the Cursed Earth, the Mutant Wars, and Judge Death. Critics loved it. Audiences who saw it loved it, but marketing failed. It bombed in theaters and only gained cult traction via home video. Carl Urban openly campaigned for a sequel. Fans signed petitions. Producers toyed with a Netflix revival. But studio hesitation killed momentum. Dread remains one of the greatest Chapter 1s that never got a Chapter 2. A film that could have reshaped sci-fi action into something raw, mean, and beautifully grounded. Instead, it stands alone, justice served, but the war unfinished. Fact Route 9 Equilibrium, 2002. In a post-Matrix landscape, studios scrambled to replicate the formula: dystopian worlds, black trench coats, bullet-time action. But Equilibrium wasn't just a copycat, it was a bold, philosophical provocation. Starring Christian Bale as a government enforcer in a world where emotion is outlawed, the film introduced gun kata, a stylized martial art blending firearms and choreography. But beneath the action was a deeper question. What is humanity without feeling? The film ends with a revolution. Walls are broken, regimes fall. But it's not closure, it's ignition, the first spark of rebellion. Clearly, the world of Equilibrium was meant to evolve. How would society rebuild? What threats would emerge next? Fans wanted answers. Concept art for sequels circulated. Discussions of a series or spiritual successor were whispered. But Equilibrium was buried under poor marketing and a staggered, quiet release. It didn't flop, it faded. Bale went on to become Batman. Director Kurt Wimmer returned to studio projects. The rich, minimalist world of Libria left unexplored. Looking back, Equilibrium wasn't a film that needed a sequel. It was a world that demanded one. Fact Hassan Zero, The Last Starfighter, 1984. Before Ready Player One, before Ender's Game, there was The Last Starfighter, a film that took arcade dreams and launched them into deep space. It's a classic fantasy setup. A small-town teenager masters a video game only to discover it was a test, and he's now been recruited to fight in a real intergalactic war. The film ends with victory and a clear invitation. You can come too, the hero says, beckoning others to follow him into the stars. A sequel felt inevitable. Fans waited, scripts were drafted, rumors swirled. For decades, the IP remained in limbo, tangled in rights disputes and studio apathy. What makes the silence even stranger is how influential the film became. It inspired generations of sci-fi writers, coders, even game developers. It was the blueprint for the idea that virtual skill could lead to real-world consequence. And yet, nothing. No part 2, no series. Just one beautiful, earnest, and criminally underused piece of 80-second space adventure. In a timeline where this film launched a multi-part saga, we might have gotten our own Star Wars light. Instead, we got silence. The Last Starfighter didn't fail. It was left behind by a system that didn't yet understand how much its audience was ready for a universe beyond the arcade screen. Fact Hashinon Dark City, 1998. Before The Matrix revolutionized the simulation narrative, Dark City was already unraveling reality. Directed by Alex Proyas, the film dropped viewers into a noir-drenched world where time resets, cities reshape, and mysterious strangers manipulate memory itself. Everything about Dark City screamed universe. The cosmic architecture, the ancient, dying alien race, the unexplained psychic tuning powers. The ending? Less a resolution, more a reset button, the birth of a new world forged by a single man's mind. It was made to be continued, but Warner Brothers didn't see the potential. The marketing was confused. Critics didn't quite get it. The Matrix would later succeed using similar themes with better branding and timing. As a result, Dark City became a cult classic, but not a franchise. Its visionary director moved on. No sequel, no novelization, no exploration of the new world that was literally created in its final scene. Ironically, fans still argue that Dark City laid the groundwork for modern existential sci-fi. It could have been the flagship for a darker, more cerebral sci-fi cinematic universe. Instead, it remains suspended, like its floating city, in a forgotten corner of genre history. Fact Hason 2 Push, 2009. Bacham. Released at the height of superhero cinema's second wind, Push seemed positioned to be the gritty alternative. Starring Chris Evans just before he would wield Captain America's shield and Dakota Fanning, the film introduced a richly layered world where psychics, telekinetics, and precogs were hunted by a global shadow agency known as Division. But this wasn't just another mutant movie. Push unfolded like an espionage thriller crossed with Akira. The jargon-heavy world-building, diverse power sets, and cliffhanger ending with characters still on the run, and major plot threads unresolved, made it obvious. This was meant to be Chapter 1. Lionsgate and Summit had plans. The DVD release hinted at sequels. Online ARGs teased a broader mythology. Yet, despite its unique premise and cult following, Push fizzled at the box office, overshadowed by flashier franchises. The problem wasn't the concept, it was the timing. Before streaming allowed slow-burn sci-fi to thrive, Push was trying to launch an interconnected story universe in theaters without the Marvel infrastructure behind it. Today, it's a curious footnote in Evans's career, and a painful reminder that sometimes the world you build is too big for a single film to carry. Push too far, too soon. Fact Hason 3 Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, 2004. Bacham. A pulp dream rendered in digital ink, Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow was both retro and revolutionary. Starring Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Angelina Jolie, it was a love letter to 1,930 seconds adventure serials, filtered through a fully blue-screened, CGI-heavy aesthetic that predated Sin City and 300. The film teased a larger universe of flying cities, mad scientists, and post-steampunk technology. Characters like Commander Frankie Cook and the mysterious Dr. Totenkopf hinted at deep backstories. Even the title "And the World of Tomorrow" sounded like Chapter 1 of something grand. But the film's stylized visuals and unconventional tone proved polarizing. Audiences didn't know what to make of it. Box office returns were soft. Plans for sequels, including one set on a floating city in Venus's atmosphere, were shelved indefinitely. Director Cary Conran, once hailed as a digital visionary, never directed another feature film. His entire cinematic universe collapsed under the weight of a single misunderstood release. Today, Sky Captain is remembered as a cult gem, a digital frontier before its time, a first issue without a series, a spark that should have lit the sky, but flickered out instead. Fact Hason 4 Chronicle, 2012. Bacham. What if a found-footage superhero origin story didn't lead to hope, but to horror? Chronicle, directed by Josh Trank, was an anomaly in the superhero-saturated 2010 seconds. It was lean, dark, intimate. The tale of three teenagers who gain telekinetic powers and spiral into destruction. The final scene all but screams franchise. With one survivor fleeing to Tibet to discover the origin of their powers, fans expected a sequel to deepen the mythology. Scripts were rumored, plans were leaked. A cinematic universe of grounded, morally ambiguous superhumans was in the works. Then, silence, studio politics, behind-the-scenes conflicts, and a disastrous fallout between Trank and 20th Century Fox. After Fantastic Four tanked, all conspired to kill the follow-up. What remained was a single, brilliant firework of a film, left dangling with more questions than answers. In an era where franchises bloated with spin-offs and reboots, Chronicle stood apart as a film that genuinely deserved continuation, but was abandoned instead. Some say the story was too dark. Others believe Hollywood simply didn't know what to do with a superhero saga that didn't sell toys. Either way, Chronicle became the pilot episode of a franchise that never aired. Fact Hason 5 Strange Days, 1995. Bacham. Before Black Mirror, before Minority Report, there was Strange Days. Directed by Catherine Bigelow and produced by James Cameron, this noir-infused cyberpunk thriller painted a disturbingly prescient vision of 1999 Los Angeles. Memory recordings, systemic corruption, and racial unrest, all filtered through a gritty, chaotic lens. The film ends not with resolution, but revelation. The characters survive, but the world they live in is far from saved. Seeds were clearly planted for a larger story, one where the illegal playback technology spreads, mutates, and consumes the culture from within. There was room for a trilogy, even a full-blown cinematic universe exploring the ethics of memory and digital addiction. But Strange Days was a box office disaster. Critics were divided. Audiences weren't ready for how raw, prophetic, and emotionally brutal the film was. It made less than a fifth of its budget. The franchise dream died quietly, and Hollywood never let Bigelow direct another sci-fi feature for over 2 decades. Ironically, the tech featured in Strange Days feels more relevant than ever. Neural interfaces, immersive memory playback, surveillance states all now creeping into real life. The film wasn't just ahead of its time, it was too far ahead. And maybe that's why the franchise never happened. Not because it lacked vision, but because the future it predicted hit too close to home. Bonus fact, Southland Tales, 2006. Bacham tu. And before we reach the end, let's talk about a film that's too weird to ignore. Southland Tales is the cinematic fever dream that nearly ended Richard Kelly's career. Following the cult success of Donnie Darko, he returned with an apocalyptic sci-fi musical starring The Rock, Sarah Michelle Gellar, and Justin Timberlake singing The Killers. It wasn't a film, it was part 4/6 of a planned 6-part story, with the first 3 chapters released only as graphic novels. It had time rifts, twin identities, energy conspiracies, and porn stars predicting Armageddon. It bombed spectacularly at Cannes. Critics hated it, distribution was butchered, and yet it's grown into something mythical. Why? Because Southland Tales was trying to be a franchise in reverse. It was already a universe. It just started in the wrong place. Some fans believe the graphic novels and deleted scenes contain keys to unlocking its meaning. Others think it was never meant to be solved. Either way, it remains a cursed artifact, a sci-fi franchise that never had a chance, but left a crater anyway. Franchises don't die because of bad ideas. They die because of bad timing, studio, fear, or silence. These films weren't just one-offs. They were gateways to larger worlds cut short before they could breathe. So now, the question is yours. Which of these forgotten sci-fi foundations deserves resurrection, and which should remain untouched relics of what could have been? Drop your thoughts. And remember, just because a film stands alone doesn't mean it was ever meant to.